Hey friends, in this video we'll be talking about the new Nikon D850, especially in comparison with the 5D Mark IV and a little bit additionally in comparison with the A7R Mark II. I'm pretty sure that the D850 is a BFD, and so I'm really interested in getting into it with you. So I was in the camera store, my local camera store the other day, and I was talking to one of the employees, and what they were saying is that the difference between my XS and my 6D in terms of the performance was the same difference that I'd get between like a 6D and an A7 or an A7 II series camera. And that really struck me as odd, because in terms of image quality and dynamic range and ISO performance and all that. And that kind of struck me as odd because I didn't realize that there could be such a big gap opening so quickly. And you know, I've learned since then that Canon segments their market to such an extent that that kind of thing becomes the case very easily. Now I'm bringing this up because the way that Canon's segmented their market means that the D850 beats it on paper every day of the week right out the gate. The only place it doesn't is in live view, continuous autofocus and video, where it's contrast based only. I do think the D850 needs on-sensor phase detection. I think Nikon needs on-sensor phase detection. And I know Nikon has a patent that's very similar to dual pixel autofocus. You know, knowing the way that enterprise kind of works in terms of nomenclature, I wouldn't be surprised if they just hadn't come up with a good name for it yet. But, you know, the D850 really does blow the 5D Mark IV out of the water in every regard, save perhaps dual pixel autofocus in video. And the really key thing too is that it not only does everything the 5D does better, it also does a lot more than the 5D does. So it's from 30 megapixels to nearly 46, so you're getting about half as many, again, more megapixels to work with, which is fantastic. You're getting like you know, 2.5 or something times as many autofocus points that are all between -3 and -4 EV sensitivity. So you can use a whole bunch of points in the center for, you know, an f4 lens with a 2x converter. So you can use this camera, the D850, for birding as well, while the 5D Mark IV doesn't have that same AF point light sensitivity. In terms of video, the D850 has full frame 4K recording. What Canon has come out and said in the past is that Canon can't do full frame 4K because of the magnesium alloy bodies, and it's the magnesium alloy bodies that are holding Sony back and holding everybody back. But you have a magnesium alloy body in the GH5, and it's also recording 6 times as much data because it's 10-bit 422. So that's not really an actual argument against why Canon can't implement full frame 4K. So the D850 has solved full frame 4K. Now I don't know what megabits per second, what bit rates the D850's got that on, but I do know that it's to either an XQD card or a UHS-2 card, which on both fronts is better than the CFast 2.0 card only that the 5D Mark IV can do. Before everybody starts screaming autofocus in video, autofocus in video, autofocus in video, which I have kind of touched on already, the big thing is, if in case everybody's forgotten, the A7S II only uses contrast-based autofocus detect, which is fine for stills, but it does suffer a little bit in video. But that is and has been at times kind of one of the cameras that predominant YouTubers have predominantly used. That is a camera that a lot of people have kind of religiously, you know, used and transitioned to from Canon because of its immense capability and capacity. So the contrast-based autofocus points don't really impact most people's utilization of full-frame 4K video. What impacts it more is whether or not you have it. Because the D850 does offer clean HDMI out for 4K, you can actually put this in, you can actually get 10-bit 422 on this if you're going to use an external monitor and recorder. Now, where that differs from the 5D Mark IV, again, is the frame size. So on the D850, you can do full frame or you can do crop, and both of those are going to give you a great 4K image, because the full frame is actually a down sample to 4K, while the DX is just the 4K. So the Canon version of that is to just give you a really severe crop, rather than actually giving you full functionality of your sensor. I'm harping on this because it's increasingly important to differentiate yourself as a DSLR manufacturer, and Nikon is the only DSLR manufacturer that's differentiating themselves. Canon is being lazy and falling by the wayside, and the D850 with the 30 frames per second with electronic shutter, you know, with the 9 AF with the 9 FPS with the battery grip attached, it's gonna outperform with the resolution and the dynamic range that series of Nikons is famous for, you know, becoming on par with medium format cameras for, is really blowing Canon out of the water. The 5D Mark IV suffers at high ISO by comparison to the competition, notably the A7R II. Now, the D850 has a backside illuminated sensor which will put it on par with the A7R II. So, in terms of ISO performance, it's reasonable to expect that the 5D Mark IV is going to get blown out of the water. In terms of dynamic range, the 5D Mark IV's dynamic range was beat by the Nikon D3400 that got released in 2011. So, just like the 6D Mark II. So, you know, from a dynamic range perspective, the D800 series has already destroyed the 5D series in terms of dynamic range. Now, getting onto the video, we're seeing the exact same, like I just talked about, and then there's also a flat picture profile that you don't have to pay extra for. So you're not going to have to deal with buying extra Canon log type of thing for the Nikon. The D850 is the only real flagship DSLR that is also a dual, all-purpose, completely versatile DSLR. There are two other really crucial points. First off, the D850 has an articulating touchscreen, so it's a tilty touchscrreen, which is immensely useful. That's what I have on my 6300. That's what all the A7 series cameras have. Like, it's so much more important to have some sort of articulation on your screen than have it be, you know, the whole tilty flippy thing. You gotta have some, and you get so far on just a tilt. You don't entirely need the flip, so that's a huge deal for me. Additionally, then there's also no optical low pass filter, which is also good. You're gonna have incredible sharpness because there's not that extra thing blocking, you know, the light from getting all crazy. Additionally, because of its incredibly high megapixel count, you're really probably not going to deal with moire or aliasing at all. And really what you got to realize is that what consumers have to start realizing is that you don't need to sacrifice speed for resolution or resolution for speed. And that's what we're seeing out of the D850. The D850 is saying, not only can I be a hybrid photography and video shooter like it is with full frame 4K, it can also do very high resolution and very high resolution at 9 frames a second, which is a huge deal. Like, that should not be understated. The 5D Mark IV is not that. It has ISO limitations, it has dynamic range limitations, it has video limitations. You can't do everything. It doesn't even have it's half again as many megapixels just about as the 5D Mark IV has in the D850. So in no regard is the 5D Mark IV going to be able to stand up. 5D Mark IV does not at all in any regard stand up to the D850. The D850 is by far a superior camera. I've already argued that the comprehensive inclusion and implementation of electronic shutter on the D850 makes it the next DSLR revolution. But I think more than that, what it does is it's a huge statement to the industry, to people's expectations, to building brand equity, to make a true flagship camera that is fundamentally accessible by comparison to traditionally understood to be flagship models. To make a flagship camera like the D850 is so good. It has everything in it. You can do everything with it because they've put everything, and I can't emphasize that enough. Like, the D850 is the best possible camera that Nikon could have made. Everybody's going on all the time about how, you know, there's no perfect camera, but I genuinely feel like the D850 is the closest that we've ever gotten to the perfect camera. In terms of DSLRs, I think the A7R2, in many regards, is as close as we're going to get to the perfect camera, but the A7R2 doesn't have the same sort of raw file size options that the D850 has. It doesn't have the same high frame rate options like the D850 has. It has a lot more limitations. You know, it doesn't have 8K video, blah, 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 but, you know, that still is giving you everything you could want. Full frame 4K video. It's giving you really high resolution. It's giving you excellent dynamic range. It's giving you excellent ISO performance. So, you know, the real competition, it feels like, is between Nikon and Sony sold Nikon the damn sensor. So, you know, I feel like this is just, you know, a very strong step in the right direction for Nikon and for the market against Canon, because the people that care, right, the people that aren't just upgrading with Canon because they already have EF lenses, people that actually care about their photography, to me, feel like they're gonna sit up and take notice. They might not buy a D850, but they're gonna take notice, and they're gonna start expecting that kind of versatility, and that really, and they're gonna start expecting that general purposeness and that standard of performance in Canon bodies, in other brands' bodies that we're not seeing right now. And so I think the D850 is a huge kickstart, especially if it sells well, which it seems like it's going to. It's going to be a huge kickstart for the ILC market, as well as Nikon, and as well as Canon. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.